If you ask me whether I feel British and how I identify, I would say I identify as confused. When I go to Poland, I feel British. When I'm in Britain, I feel Polish.
If Anna Blasiak was to make her decision to leave Poland now, she would hesitate to come to the UK. This is Writer's Mosaic, What We Leave We Carry, the series that tells the true life stories of migration to the UK.
I was born in Poland on the Baltic coast, 19 years in the north of Poland and then 10 years in Warsaw. And then I seem to be moving every 10 years. When I was 29, I moved to London. And then when I was 39, I moved to Ramsgate in Kent. I come from a very traditional Catholic family. It was a glorious childhood. I have mainly good memories. No, there were things that weren't so fantastic. It was communist times, and sometimes it was a bit grim and drab. But we're talking 80s, so it was the time when I think Poland was really very grey and poor and suppressed politically. But poor, there weren't many things that you could go and buy. But people, it was this kind of countryside. It wasn't pretty fences and well-kept gardens. It was a bit wild, a bit unkempt, a bit full of rubbish. So people would chuck things out, in the fields that they didn't need. And then we would go and find those things and we would repurpose them, like an old cooking pot which had a hole in the bottom, and we would find a use for it. I remember this thing that we had in the 80s, which was called wyrób czekoladopodobny, which literally means chocolate-like product. And it was this sweet, dull, greasy thing which didn't have any cocoa or maybe very little of it. And that's what we had instead of chocolate, because these were the times. I was 7 when martial law was introduced. That was on 13th of December 1981. I think every Polish person of my generation just remembers this date always. It was a Sunday, and my mom, who is a doctor, was coming back from a night shift in the hospital. And I remember she came home and she had to walk because there was no public transport. Everything stopped overnight. And she had to walk, and she told us that this is what happened. And I also remember that probably even more painful for me at the age of 7 was the fact that there was no Teleranek. Teleranek was a weekly kids program in the morning on a Sunday, and we all watched it. And suddenly we got up on that particular Sunday in December 81, and there was no Teleranek because everything stopped overnight. For me as a kid, it meant that this very weird time has started, which lasted a good few years, where, for example, food was rationed. And I remember, every person would get those cards when you had little bits that you would cut out, and it says that, you can get a certain amount of flour, a kilogram of flour or something. And there was everything was rationed. It was all very, very, very basic and very hard. This is the time when we had chocolate-like product. I remember, yet another party, birthday party at this auntie's or that auntie's, where they would share illegal literature, books published by Solidarity or other illegal printers and publishing houses. And people would just distribute them. It was it went from, one set of hands to another. People would share it. And my family did that too. So I knew there was something. And I also very vividly remember first free election in 1989, where the system, after this election, the system has changed. And I was 15, so I couldn't vote. I was too young. And I was absolutely distraught about it. I wanted to be part of that. I was the last year in primary and in secondary school who had obligatory Russian, so I used to speak pretty good Russian, but Western languages came a little bit later, in high school only. But I started learning English much earlier, actually first on my own, and then I had private lessons that my parents paid for. But I started learning English by translating, funnily enough, because I then became a translator from English and into English. There was this publication, and on the last page they always published lyrics of one pop song that was popular at the time. And I would sit there with the magazine and my little dictionary trying to translate the lyrics of that song. And then I had a very, very good teacher in high school who spent quite a lot of time in Britain, I think after the war. She was quite elderly. And she even looked like how, at the time, I imagined a very distinguished looking elderly English lady, wearing her tweeds and always impeccable hair. And she looked prim and proper. And she was a very, very good teacher. So I think I owe her a lot. I was tutoring young kids in English for I think a year or two and saving all that money to be able to go to England. And then I don't know why I had all that money on me in my wallet at school, and I don't know if I lost it or somebody stole it, but the money was gone. So I was completely distraught, and then my parents stepped in and said, okay, we'll pay for that trip to England so you can go. And we couldn't afford to send me to a language school. We couldn't afford to even find a cheap hotel or something like that, or a bed and breakfast. So my mom is a doctor, and she met this lady who was Polish, but she was a lawyer. She was living in England. And I remember we went to a meeting with her, and again she had this very, very kind of cool and distanced English, as I imagined, demeanor and look, very how I imagined English ladies would dress. But she was actually a lovely and warm lady, and she said, okay, I know I have friends in London, and I think they might be happy to have you for summer. So I exchanged a few letters with Jane and Charles, who then became my very, very good friends. She was an American lady, an artist, and he was British. And we exchanged a few letters, and they basically invited me over and said, come and stay with us for summer. So I came to England for the first time in 93, and I spent 6 weeks in London, basically walking around, listening to English, not talking too much at first because I think I was petrified that I'm going to be making terrible mistakes. And my friend Charles, my host, he was really funny because he would play, the radio was always on in their kitchen, and he said he did it on purpose. He put on some comedy programs, I can't remember what it was, and there was somebody speaking with quite a strong Scottish accent, and he was basically testing me whether and he said, yeah, you're laughing at the right moments, it's good, you're getting it. So he was testing me. He also tested me with Marmite then, yes, and other English foods. I mean, at the time, the first time I came, that was summer before I started uni in Warsaw. So I came from a smallish town in Poland, which was quite quiet, to Ladbroke Grove in London. So it was a barrage of sounds and smells and noise and lights and colours and everything. It was so colourful compared to Poland at the time. Poland was still grey. That first time when I came, I really didn't know what the setup will be, because I only exchanged a few letters with Jane and Charles, and they invited me, but I didn't know what that meant. So I remember I came. That's what we used to do in Poland. If you didn't have a lot of money, and nobody did, if you travel and you're staying somewhere a long time, you take food with you. You take tins and and packets and stuff. So I arrived with a bag full of food, and I remember Jane looking at me saying like, "What did you think? We're not going to feed you?" I came to England also to do research for my master's dissertation, which was on Peter Greenaway's costumes in Peter Greenaway's film. So I came to London. I met with Peter Greenaway, did an interview with him, and worked a lot in libraries. It was the most exciting was British Library, still in the old location in the British Museum before they moved. I was working already when I was at uni in the Royal Castle in Warsaw, in education department, and as a journalist here, there, and everywhere, and as a translator. And then a few years after finishing uni, I bought a flat in Warsaw, outside of Warsaw, technically speaking, and within few months, interest rates for my mortgage went up through the roof, like from something in the level of 5% to 18%. So suddenly I was really struggling financially, and I thought, okay, maybe I can come to England instead of coming for holidays and just hanging around and spending time with my friends. Maybe I can come and earn a little bit of money. That was still time when, the money you could earn in England and the money you could earn in Poland is like completely different, incomparable situations. So I've decided to come to England for summer, and I worked as a cleaner, and it was really funny. I worked for this family. The lady was American, and her husband was Italian. And she interviewed me for the job, and she asked me what I do. And I said, well, I have an office job in Poland. And after a week, she came to me and she says, you lied, didn't you? You don't have an office job in Poland. And I said, well, if I told you that I'm an art historian, I've just graduated, and I have a job in a museum and I'm translating books, would you give me this job? And she said, probably not. And there you go. So I came to England in December 2003 to work as a nanny. The plan was to stay for a year, and it's over 20 years now, and I'm still here. I don't know what made me decide to stay, but I know when it happened. I remember it very vividly. I was in a taxi in the middle of the night. It was early spring, late April, maybe something like that. I was coming back home from a night in a club, in fact, and I suddenly thought I could live here. And that was, 5 months from the moment when I moved here. Before that, it was always, I come and visit, but I always go back to Poland. I live in Poland. And this was the moment when everything changed in my head. I don't know what triggered it. I started applying for jobs in museums in the UK. And in theory, my degree from Poland, from University of Warsaw, was recognized here. I had about 10 years experience of working in museum education in Poland at that point. So I was kind of ticking all the boxes, but I was never even invited for an interview. And I thought, let me do an experiment. So I went to uni. I did a course in, what was it called? Museum Policy and Management, I think. And I started applying for jobs in museums, in education again, and suddenly I'm getting interviews. So, and I got a job pretty quickly. So I started a job in a little museum in South Bank, and it was great because I needed to prove to myself that I'm good enough, and it's not why I'm not getting those jobs. I think it's systemic. I think even though theoretically my master's from University of Warsaw was recognized, it wasn't seen as good enough. When I applied for British citizenship, I had to do something called Life in the UK, I think, exam. And Life in the UK exam, very interesting thing. I remember going through the textbook for this exam and asking certain questions from the list, from the book, to my very British colleagues at work, and some of the questions they wouldn't be able to answer. Like a percentage of the society that's different races, not white, for example. They wouldn't even come close to the actual numbers. They would always say that it was a higher number than it actually was. It's an interesting idea to force people to learn a little bit about the culture, the customs, the history of the place. I think it's right to do that, but some of it was quite ridiculous. When I came to England, I didn't really hang out with Poles much, kind of on purpose, because I thought I want to be forced to speak English and I want to learn about other people. I don't want to same all. I know how Polish people think. I come from Poland. I've spent 29 years there. I was looking for something new, something more challenging, and I wanted also to force myself not to speak Polish. Although I overdid it at some point, and my Polish started slipping away, and that was bloody scary. It actually sent me into a panic mode because I'm a translator. I work between languages. A language is a mentality. And to feel that your first language is slipping away is really a very uncomfortable feeling. So I then started working very hard to make it better. So speak Polish, ideally people in Poland, because they speak different language, that language changes. I lost contact with the live language when I left Poland over 20 years ago. And I need that, especially as a translator also into Polish. I often worry that my Polish is not the right, I'm not hitting the right tones, I'm not using the right phrases, especially when I translate books for children. So I have my consultants, my nephews, I call them, and I check, certain phrases. First, I wanted to hang out with British people and lots of other foreigners. Actually, I had lots of my closest friend in this country is Serbian. I had a very close Italian friend. There were a lot of foreign people, because I think you just naturally gravitate, because there are certain things that we all experience, and which are sometimes difficult to explain to British people. Because they are in a privileged position. They have never been in a position when you open your mouth, people immediately pick up that you're speaking with an accent, and they pigeonhole you often, not always, but often. Or they ask you, where are you from? Dreaded question. Oh, I had it last week that somebody asked me whether I'm from Utrecht, and then yesterday on the train, the lady asked me whether I'm Dutch, and I'm thinking, really? My accent sounds, but yeah, that's what people hear. That was quite interesting, actually. I thought, I am not a tall, slim person. I don't look Dutch. I don't think I speak with an accent that sounds Dutch, but clearly I do, because that's what she thought. I am not terribly sensitive, but my wife, who is born here, but she's of mixed origin, and she experienced proper full-on racism in the 70s in this country. She has a much more sensitive radar. So I remember this one situation when we were at a local market where we live, and that was around shortly probably before the Brexit referendum. And so I'm buying fruit and vegetables at the market, and this lady turns to me and asks me, oh, where are you from? And to me, it's an innocent question. It's sometimes annoying because you have to constantly, go into this whole story. But I don't necessarily perceive it as something hostile. But Lisa, my wife, does, because that's her experience. So she immediately sprung into action, and she said she's from Poland, but she pays her taxes here, which shut the elderly lady up for good. There was a moment when it got a little bit unpleasant after the Brexit referendum. So I remember I was actually in Poland during the referendum. I voted by postal vote earlier, and when I came back, it was strange. It was, people would walk down the street and not look each other in the eye, like they were kind of ashamed or scared. Lisa, my wife, told me, okay, but if you're out in the street, please don't speak Polish. If you call your mother, call her from home, don't call her on your walks. That's what I tend to do, because people were behaving strangely. And I remember this one particular time when my parents were visiting, and we were on the bus going to a local shopping center, because my mom is a shopaholic. So my parents are sitting behind me together, and I'm sitting next to this elderly lady in front of them, and we're talking in Polish, as we would. And then I'm kind of sensing this lady getting more and more uncomfortable and giving me really stern looks. And at some point I turned to her, and in the best English I could muster, and very calmly, I promise you I didn't get angry, I was very calm. I asked her very politely whether we're making her uncomfortable, whether we're doing something that's making her uncomfortable. Perhaps we're speaking too loudly. Please tell us, we'll lower our voices. Or is it just because we're speaking a different language? And all she said was, I'm getting off anyway. So we sat there in a very uncomfortable silence for the rest of the journey. So my wife was born in this country in the 60s, and she grew up in Basingstoke. Her parents both come from Trinidad, mainly of Indian origins, but quite mixed. So Lisa has a whole world in her veins, I always say. And as a kid growing up in Basingstoke in the 70s, she experienced like textbook racism, but she says she didn't actually realize that it was what it was until she was a bit older and she moved to London and went to uni. And then looking back, she could actually label what it was, being called a P word or So yeah, that's her experience, and she often says that, like, I may experience some racism, but it's on a different level, and I only get it when I open my mouth. If I stay quiet, I I can pass. She can't. In her case, it's opposite actually, because when she opens her mouth, she can speak Queen's English, but because she's not white, she gets. And actually, very recently, we were walking past a little cafe, and some guy just and completely. I mean, he was eating his English breakfast or whatever, and we were just walking past him, and we didn't. But there was no interaction, and he just mumbled something under his breath, like "FP" about Lisa, and that was quite shocking. So I am often asked whether I left Poland because I'm gay, like, just to have an easier life. And the answer is no. Because when I left Poland, I didn't even fully realize that I was gay. I was kind of not sure. So I had this moment of realization that yes, I am, and I'm not bisexual, I'm gay, when I was already in England. And one day it just clicked. And then yes, my life would be harder in Poland, probably. But at the same time, when we go to Poland together with my wife, we never really experienced homophobia. I know it happens. I hear stories, terrible stories, but my story, it didn't happen to us. If anything, we get slightly, sometimes annoying curiosity in Poland, but not unfriendly. When it comes to British food, specifically, not much there. I mean, even things like, okay, I've learned tea with milk, but it's not something that comes naturally to somebody coming from Eastern Europe. We drink tea with lemon, if anything. And actually, Polish food is, I don't know one single person, a foreigner, who tried Polish food, good Polish food, and didn't like it. It's quite meat heavy traditionally, but it's changing these days, but it's very flavoursome. There's a lot of flavour. I think not so much in British food. My grandma used to make an absolutely wonderful yeast cake, which is a very traditional cake. Pretty much every household in Poland, but it has to be homemade. You can buy it in shops, but it's never as good as the homemade one, because the secret is you have to have it very fresh, and then it's really fluffy and light. And you put some fruit on top and crumble. And I remember my grandma, baking it and freshly taken out. The smell of that cake when you just take it out of the oven and you eat it, like, you just have to wait for it to cool down a little bit. And my grandma would like be hanging over us. It's like, no, wait, not yet. It's still hot. It's just absolutely delicious. So going back to cooking actually and foods, I pickle, and I'm pickling more and more the older I get. I started only a few years ago. It's a new thing for me and I love it. Cucumbers, beetroot for beetroot soup, proper beetroot soup, not with sweet, earthy, soily beetroot, but pickled, sour, fermented. Fermented foods are just to die for, and they're so easy to make. So yeah, so that's a very Polish thing, but not only Polish, of course. So I have many angel figures in my house because my mom keeps insisting on giving them to us, and I don't have the heart to tell her I'm not that keen, and I don't have a heart to throw them away because she gives them to us. And also crosses, which really annoys me because my mom is very religious and I'm not, and she knows it, but she still insists on bringing, and she scatters them around the house, and then you find them in different corners. And sometimes they're quite pretty. I am an art historian, so I can appreciate religious art, but yeah, and then I let them stay if they're pretty, but if they're not so pretty, then they kind of get somewhere in the corner, hidden away. But yeah, that's a very Polish thing. My mum, for many years, was really quite unhappy about the fact that I'm so far away from her. But my mum recently, because my mum is getting older, we all do, so she's been thinking about her arrangements and how she wants to be buried, and then I told her that I want to be cremated. And I don't know why she got it into her head, but she assumed that I would want to be and I would be buried with my parents. Why would I? I live in a different country, I have my life here. Why would I? But somehow, and it's become a very, very big issue. And we have this dispute going on with my mom saying, no, you have to be buried with us. And I'm saying, I want to just have my ashes scattered here in the sea. I don't want to be buried in Poland with my parents necessarily. I go to Poland quite regularly, more and more so now because my parents are getting older, so it's easier for me to travel there than the other way around. And on one hand, it's like being 17 again. And I have, as I mentioned earlier, I have a big family and very closely knit family. So some of my elderly aunties, they still treat me like I'm 17. They want to know everything. They ask me zillions of questions. It's exhausting. It's wonderful. I really treasure it. But at the same time, it exhausts me. And also, every time I go, I have this moment when I think, okay, it's time to go, because I'm getting to the point when I'm gonna start losing this nostalgic, idealized vision of life in Poland, and the reality will start squeaking and being not so pleasant. And I don't think I would ever be able to move back to Poland, also because of that. Because I know that reality, life in Poland is not what I now imagine and experience it to be. It would be much harder than I think. And I don't wish to have that confrontation, to be honest. I think I miss the language and I miss the people. I don't miss... What is Poland? What is this concept? What should I be missing? I woke up with this line on my lips recently, which I might use in some writing, which basically patriotism is just another religion. So when you ask me, do I miss Poland? If we were to go in this direction, then no, absolutely not. But I miss specific things about Poland. I behave differently when I speak one language over the other. So I am more Polish when I speak Polish. I am more British when I speak English. I'm louder in Polish. I speak with my arms. I wave my arms, and I don't seem to do that much in English, or less of it. It's a bit toned down. I think I'm kind of slightly more distant as a British person than as a Polish person. I think I swear more as a Polish person. But again, I'm kind of more expressive in Polish. I think British people have a certain stereotype of Polish people still. I think it's changing, but predominant thing would still be that Polish people are the hardworking nannies, cleaners, builders, not necessarily well-educated people. I think it takes British people still often takes them by surprise when they see Polish people who are in high-flying jobs, or especially in academia or art jobs. Like, that's kind of not what they assign to them. But generally, I think, Brexit aside, I have to say that they seem to like Polish people and respect them for, being hardworking and doing the jobs that the British people don't want to do often. I don't think I have any regrets, but if it was now, I probably wouldn't choose Britain. Because I think I came to a country that was comfortable for everybody, that had good infrastructure, that offered a really nice life. And in the period that I've been here, things went downhill big time. And I see poverty, I see infrastructure crumbling. That doesn't mean I regret anything, but because I already built life here, I have a wife, I have friends, I have a life. I wouldn't want to leave that life behind and start anew. But 20 years ago, I think I would choose somewhere else. Home right now is in this country, and home is where my wife and my dog is, and where my things are, books and other things. If you ask me about whether I feel British, and how I identify, I would say I identify as confused. I do feel British sometimes, but I think I really do believe that everybody who moved from one place to another, even once in their life, they are always from the in-between. They don't belong. I don't belong in... When I go to Poland, I feel British. When I'm in Britain, I feel Polish.
Anna Blasiak was talking to Maria Jastrzębska.